What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Pick Six Podcast. Katie Mox here with Will Brinson, and welcome back to our All 32 series, the series where we catch up with insiders to give you the need to know on every NFL team. And today we are talking about the New York Jets with former defensive end Borgain Green, as well as Jets insider and CBS Sports football analyst Douzable. Lige, thank you so much for joining us today. How you doing?
I'm doing good, Will. Mox, how are you guys doing today?
Doing great. Although I will say, I feel bad because I did just call the Jets trash on Twitter, but mainly only because somebody, a Jets fan, saw my quarterback tiers and said that this list is trash. And I know it's trash because you're trash, Will. And my reply was, well, you root for the Jets and Knicks. So, you're an expert in recognizing trash.
See, Will, you brought it up earlier. I wasn't even going to get into that because I know you told everybody to read it. So I went and actually read it, unlike most people.
Thank you.
And there is some gripes. I do have a few gripes. It's
gripe away. Like,
I'm not as bad as everybody else, but I do have a few gripes.
Well, I've got a gripe. I love my boy Chris Trapasso, but he tweeted out the image of the tiers, but didn't include the names of the tiers. And so people are like, you have Kyler Murray in the 6th tier. And I'm like, yes, that doesn't make sense if Kyler's healthy and the Cardinals aren't tanking. But since they are, I think, and Kyler's not healthy, and Kyler's 100%. Seen the list now. And so Kyler's at me. So if Kyler plays well this year, it's going to be a dunk fest on me.
If he plays this year, we don't
see. That's what I'm saying. That's why he's in. That's why he's in tier 6. Like, I have no clue if he plays. I think he sits all year and they take for Caleb Williams. Nevertheless, can I call you Deuce? Is that cool?
Of course.
Okay, awesome. I'm kind of jealous of that nickname. Aaron Rodgers is in tier 3. I think most people would have a gripe with that and say, why is he not in tier 2? And I'm okay with that gripe. And I thought about putting him in tier 2, but tier 2 is kind of like, there's another level to what we might see from these guys. And they have questions too, but Rodgers for me, and I'm curious what you think, Deuce, is like, what happens? Like, it's all sunshine and roses right now. Like, the flowers are blooming. It's June and July. Everybody's happy. OTAs. Everyone's healthy. That offensive line is all in place. Rodgers got great rapport with his receivers. He's showing up to voluntary. Like, what happens? Like, is this 100% going to go the right way? Like, how do you think this fits? How does this look? Rodgers in a new uniform playing for Gang Green.
Yeah, if you look at it as a whole, right, if you're a New York fan, of course you're excited because we've never had a quarterback of this caliber come to the New York Jets. I mean, the last quarterback to throw for 4,000 yards was Joe Namath, and I think that was in a 14-week season, right? So it was forever ago. If you look at Aaron Rodgers, the last time he was quote-unquote pissed off or motivated was when they drafted Jordan Love, right? Similar situations now. That was 3 years ago. He's a little bit older. And in a quote-unquote down year, he still threw for nearly 3,700 yards, right? It wasn't up to Rodgers standards, but for most quarterbacks in the league, that's a good year in the NFL, right? So if you look at that as a whole, right, he's coming to a top 5 defense who mostly is coming back intact, right? And then if you talk about the offensive line, which I know we're going to get into in this show, that's probably one of the biggest issues, right? Just can guys stay healthy? Because that's been the Jets' issue going forward. And when Rodgers doesn't have a clean pocket, we've seen the statistics. They don't look as good. So I get where you're coming from that standpoint, but I just think the motivation of Aaron Rodgers, right? When's the last time, Will, we've seen him at an OTA, right? When's the last time we've seen him hanging out with teammates? Like this dude is like a kid in the candy store right now. It seems like he's had a true love for the game again that we hadn't seen in a couple years. I
will say, and I know Katie was going to touch on the offensive line, but on the Rodgers spite thing, like that is my one hang up on fading the Jets. Like, I'm a Latte Larry's guy, right? I love a spite store. There's nothing that like I respect spite. I love spite. Right? Like, and I know Aaron Rodgers is a spiteful MFer, dude. Like, and that's the one thing that scares me about fading the Jets. Yeah,
yes,
exactly.
Yeah. I agree. There's no one does petty or spiteful like Aaron Rodgers, not even Will Brinson. But back to that really quick, I will say it. We have a group chat for Pick Six, and Brinson's biggest gripe is that all of these people have opinions about his list, but no one is actually reading the article. So, Lige, you actually read the article. Thank
That's
you.
why
I know that
I
makes
stated
Brinson.
that before I said anything.
Yeah, good.
Oh, yeah,
Okay, so
people
he said
people can call it trash as long as they click. I don't care.
But see that the Rodgers thing wasn't my biggest gripe because I could see where you muddle the line between putting them in 2 and 3 based off what you saw last year.
I know.
Mine was Josh Allen in tier 1. To
Really?
me, Will, you cannot put a guy that led the league in turnovers. And it's crazy that people don't talk about that enough. And maybe this is me being biased because I'm a defensive player. When you turn the ball over, you're killing the defense. You're killing your team. You make it that much easier for the opponent to win. And people literally dog Dak Prescott for having, 7 straight weeks of interceptions? Let's not forget, Josh Allen led the league in turnovers. Like, he himself lost that game versus Minnesota, almost cost them the game in the playoffs versus Miami, lost the game versus the Jets because he had 3 turnovers. Like, people forget that. And
Katie's gonna kill me because she's like, "You're Brinsoning the crap out of this podcast. Please shut up." But like,
I brought it back there. It's my fault.
No. But the interesting thing about that point is that I put Daniel Jones in tier 3, and people are like, "What?" Some people are like, "That's fine." Some people are like, they're angry. Like Brian Daboll left Buffalo, and Josh Allen's turnovers went through the roof, and Daniel Jones's went way down. Like Ken Dorsey, I don't think Ken Dorsey's bad, but he ain't Brian Daboll, and I think that's a really good point, especially as it relates to the Jets, Katie, because it makes them right to take over the division if maybe something happens.
Yes. All right. Well, let's just bring it back to Aaron Rodgers for 1 second here. And you talked about there wasn't a quarterback of this caliber on the team since Namath. Obviously, a big part of that is going to be the protection in this O-line, and they have invested a ton here. You got Dwayne Brown, Laken Tomlinson in free agency. Then you got Mekhi Becton, Elijah Vera Tucker in the first round. Then you got Joe Tippmann in the second round, which is probably my favorite pick that you guys had. How good can this line be in 2023?
They can be really good. I believe they can be around 10 or 11, 12 best O-line in football. I know people will look at that and be like, well, that's kind of average. But, I mean, looking from where the Jets came from, right? You talked about the depth, Katie. And that was the issue last year. And Joe Douglas did his best, right? He brought in Dwayne Brown. You talked about it. Mekhi Becton went down really early in training camp. George Fent goes down. Max Mitchell was a 4th-round pick. He wasn't even supposed to play last year. He actually played really well when he played. Then he goes down. So now if you look at the depth that they have, right, Dwayne Brown looks like he's going to play another year. Mekhi Becton is leaner than I've ever seen him. He looks really motivated, and he has an opportunity this year, right, because they didn't pick up the 5th-year option to go out there, ball out, and cash in right now. He wants to play left tackle. I don't think that's going to happen with Dwayne Brown because he's been a mainstay at left tackle. He's never really played right tackle, has never played right tackle. I think Mekhi Becton will slide over to right, but the guy I think that's going to be the glue to this offensive line is Elijah Vera Tucker. I mean, talk about versatility. To me, he's a Pro Bowl caliber guard, but when the Jets needed him in the pinch in that Denver game, he slid out to left tackle and dominated, and that's unheard of for a second-year player. People talk about the Breece Hall injury. I think the Elijah Vera Tucker injury was just as massive for the Jets last year. They just weren't able to run the football, and they weren't as versatile as far as being able to move pieces around when Elijah Vera Tucker got hurt. So him coming back healthy into the fold will be Bill. Lincoln Tomlinson is a guy that's been a Pro Bowler before, who's been in the system for most of his career. He was in San Francisco. You talked about Joe Tippmann. I thought that was a really good pick by the New York Jets, right? Versatility to play center and guard. More of a taller type guard. He's like 6'4", which you rarely see at the guard position, but a guy that's real athletic. And I think he's a really good fit in this zone scheme, right, that Nathaniel Hackett is going to employ. And then even picking up a guy like Tristan Colon, right, from the Ravens. He was a guy that has versatility that plays center and guard. So I just think the depth is better. Billy Turner is a guy that's had, a good rapport with Aaron Rodgers back with his Green Bay days. He can play guard and tackle as well. So I just feel like the depth is better. So if one guy goes down or 2 guys go down, you feel more comfortable with the guys behind them that can come in and play right away.
What's interesting too about that offensive line is you look at these guys, they're all pretty athletic. And I refer to this all the time, but I find it really fascinating. Back when the pandemic was happening, back in the heat of the pandemic, like in 2020, we had to do these we did these shows. Me and Adam Azer did them, and we would get like a former NFL player to come on depending on what game was on. Jordy Nelson joined us, and we sort of asked him about Rodgers and like the wide receiver stuff. And he this is a fascinating point to me. He's like, the sort of the signature spin where Rodgers goes through his progressions and then does like the little back roll out. Jordy says that Rodgers demands that his receivers practice a secondary break off of that spin. So like he does the spin and then expects those guys to run a second route. It's sort of like a freelance one, but like to look and recognize the coverage and then run those routes. And so that's why it kind of makes sense to bring these Packers guys in. But it's also like, if you have a really like athletic offensive line that understands Rodgers is going to do that move, and he does it the same side, he does it both sides, but mostly to the right. Like that is a huge help. And so Becton on the right side, like Becton and Elijah Vera Tucker on the right side, those dudes can move. And so I think that just sort of an interesting component of that as part of the protection. Let's take a quick break. And when we come back, we'll talk maybe a little run game, maybe a little defense, maybe a little skill positions next.
Yes.
Or we'll just do Fireman Ed stuff. Either way.
He's a great
I actually do want to like the Jets this year, by the way. Like I want everybody to get out of the Jets so I can get in on the Jets. But if like everybody's in, I don't know if I can do it.
Man, we've got so many fair weather people jumping on right now.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean that's what happens.
Jumped on, but I will say I jumped on when Saleh came over. I was like all about the Jets. So I'm a couple years in. I jumped on when Rex was there, frankly.
That's my guy. That's what I played for. Yeah.
No, I know. That's that was actually like when I started writing at CBS. My God, that man was a content godsend.
He's going to give you something to write about. For sure.
My God, every press conference, it was like we were just like, let's live blog Rex's press conference. Anywho, do you think these like I mentioned the Packers guys that came over? Is it a mistake by Green Bay by the Jets to sort of cater to Rodgers and bring those guys over? Or do you think that brings a sense of familiarity that will help him succeed?
Yeah, I think it brings a sense of familiarity. You just talked about, how Aaron Rodgers perceives certain plays when things aren't there as far as him rolling out. And these guys like Randall Cobb, Allen Lazard, they know what to do when that happens, right? And that's why I think it was monumental for Aaron Rodgers to be there in the offseason, because now he can relay that message to Garrett Wilson, can relay that to McCall Hardman, right? Because they hadn't played with him before. So when you got guys that are familiar with the system, and then also Billy Turner adding him into that conversation on the offensive line, right? It makes the transition for your quarterback a lot easier. So it wasn't like they grabbed 10 guys, right? I mean, they added Adrian Amos at the end. He's on the defensive side, but that was because Chuck Clark got hurt, right? And nobody knew that at the time, but now the reports came out. But on offense, adding a guy like Randall Cobb, who's had a real rapport with them, Allen Lazard, who's a close friend with Aaron Rodgers, is the really big, target in the red zone where the Jets have been just awful the last couple of years. I think that made sense not only for Rodgers, but for the team as well, too, because they needed a bigger receiver to go up and get the ball in the red zone. Like Corey Davis, when he's been healthy, has been able to do that. But the thing is, he's just never on the field. He's always hurt. So when you bring a guy like Allen, Lazard, and also Randall Cobb, who's familiar with Rodgers, it makes his transition so much easier.
All right, Leisha, let's talk about the sauce. Would you say that he is already the best cornerback in the NFL after just one season?
So it's interesting that you brought this up, Mox, because I've been on CBS Sports Network the last few days, right, having this discussion between the top corners, the top 25, players under the age of 25. And, of course, Sauce Gardner made that list. He was in the top 5. And a lot of people were surprised that I didn't say he was the top corner in the league. Now, again, amazing first season. Led the league in PBUs. What he's able to do with his length, even when he's beat, right? Being at 6'3", that big long frame, being able to attack the hands of the receiver and get PBUs, being able to intercept the ball in zone coverage is amazing. And we see how feisty he is in coverage. But to me, I think you need longevity, right? And longevity to me is having done it more than 1 year. And the guy I'm going to talk about has only done it 2 years. And that's Patrick Surtain. Yeah. I mean, this dude, if you turn on the film and you see some of the battles between him and Devontae Adams. Now, Devontae Adams has had some success against the Broncos, but if you watch the tape, a lot of that success happened when Patrick Surtain wasn't on him. I mean, he shut out Brandon Cooks, DK Metcalf. He shut out Brandon Ayuk, and I know people will look at me and say Brandon Ayuk, but Brandon Ayuk led that team in receiving yards last year for the 49ers.
Hell yeah.
I think he's going to be a breakout star this year as well. So If you look at
Let's go,
Surtain, man,
Leash.
the physical the presence that he brings at the line of scrimmage, his understanding of route concepts, to me, he's the number one corner in football. I'm not saying Sauce Gardner isn't right there and can potentially overtake him, but we've seen Patrick Surtain do it 2 years in a row. So to me, he's the top corner in the league. Really
fascinating too that we've had this sort of influx of young, like high-level cornerbacks.
Yeah.
You know, in a league where, you know, we'd sort of seen, you know, your boy Revis, Ramsey was one too. Sherman obviously in that scheme, but like, you know, it sort of felt like with the, you know, the proliferation of, just the aggressiveness of passing offenses, that it was just gonna be, you know, in college and pros, it was gonna be difficult. And then all of a sudden we've got this flood of young guys. It's awesome to see. 2 young guys for the Jets that I kind of like. All right, let me ask you this. Do Jermaine Johnson or Will McDonald need to have I don't want to say breakout, but like, I don't know what the word is, like sort of mini leap, whatever it is. Major leap, mini leap. Minor league, like some kind of step forward in order for this Jets defense to really thrive.
I mean, I'm gonna say no, just because they were top 5, and Jermaine started off the year really hot, right? I believe he had a sack and a half in the first 4 games. Had that foot injury that kind of slowed him down, and then played really well in that Buffalo game where he was able to chase Josh Allen down for a sack. I think he's gonna take a major leap, right? Because I would assume he's gonna get more reps this year. Vinny Curry is no longer on the team, so those reps will probably go to, you know, Jermaine Johnson. If you talk about Will McDonald, I think there's going to be a set game plan for him. I think he's just going to be a sub rusher this year because, like you just talked about, Will, they're so deep on the defensive line. I mean, John Franklin Myers is the unsung hero of this defense. He doesn't get talked about enough, has the versatility to play outside and inside. He's one of the top defensive ends in this league. Carl Lawson, coming off an Achilles, played really well, had 7 sacks, but was one of the top defensive ends in the league as far as creating pressure off the edge. You would assume 2 years removed from the Achilles injury, he's going to take a step this year. Bryce Huff, who a lot of people don't talk about, is their best pure pass rusher. I'm telling you guys, I would not be surprised if Bryce Huff is talked about in trade talks just because of how deep they are. And I'm telling you right now, the Jets brass would hate themselves for trading him because they love that kid that much. The game that we saw versus Buffalo where Josh Allen hurt his elbow, that was Bryce Huff with the game on the line. Like, he is a great pure pass rusher. So they're just so deep. I think Jermaine's going to take another step. Michael Clemens is a guy that was a 4th-round pick last year who played really well, who has some versatility to play outside and inside as well. So Will McDonald, to me, I think they're going to have a game plan for him. I don't believe he'll play too much in 1st and 2nd down, but I believe he will be able to come in on 3rd down and rush. And I believe Jermaine Johnson, I think he played about 30% of the snaps. I would see that go up to probably around 40% of the snaps this year. I think he's going to take a major leap.
All right, Leash, we've talked about how the vibes are high on the Jets. And like Brinson said there, the sun is shining. Yes. The flowers are blooming, all of the things. They have the 2nd shortest odds right now in the AFC East. Not a cakewalk, this division, just behind just the Bills, plus 250. Do you think that the Jets can win the division this year? And is that something that you would bet on?
Yeah, Mock sprinkled a little money on that plus 250, but honestly, I would sprinkle some money on that plus 290 for the Miami Dolphins. I think that's atrocious for them to be plus 290. And again, a lot of it has to do with the health of Tua Tagovailoa, right? If he's healthy and there was a crystal ball and people could see that he was going to play all 17 games, I think those odds would change drastically, right?
Agreed with
but
that.
Yes, I mean, if you look at this, the Jets are scared of the Buffalo Bills. They had Zach Wilson at quarterback and beat them one time, and the second time should have beat them, right? But Mike White got beat up because the offensive line was bad. Josh Allen only had 147 passing yards in that second game. They essentially took him out of the game, right? The Buffalo Bills were like, well, their quarterback stinks right now. We're going to run the ball the whole second half. As long as Josh Allen doesn't turn the ball over, we're going to beat the Jets. And they still almost lost that game. So if you look at it as a whole, the Jets are scared of the Bills. They're not scared of the Miami Dolphins. They lost to the New England Patriots when the defense gave up 3 points. That's crazy to even talk about. Your defense gives up 3 points and you lose the game. On a punt return at the end of the game. That's how you lose the game.
I forgot about that game.
In the other game, Zach Wilson threw for 350 yards, but he threw 3 interceptions. That's why they lost that game by 5 points. So if you look at it as a whole, if you just get adequate play from Aaron Rodgers, I believe the Jets are in a good spot to overthrow the Buffalo Bills in that division.
See, I mean, I've been like pounding the table about the Bills, and I mean, I'm not easily swayed on like my hardcore all season takes. You got me a little nervous here, like thinking about the Dorsey Dale thing.
Yeah, I'm here to break down this good film for the good people.
No, like I mean, I mean, like, you got me scared, like in a good, like I'm feel a little nervous about the Jets. The bet I like for the Jets, though, Leash, is to make the playoffs minus 150. I know the AFC is loaded, but like you point out, the Dolphins 3-1, not a crazy possibility. They win the division. Like all three of these, I mean, I doubt three of these teams are going to make the playoffs, but it's not out of the question. The AFC is so stacked. To me, I would rather lay the 150, and you can get in as one of the three wild cards. Maybe lose a tiebreaker to the Bills or the Dolphins versus going with the plus 250. But I like you said, I don't hate to sprinkle there.
Yeah, I would sprinkle something on the minus 150. If you look at it now, they have a gauntlet to start the season, right? If they can get to that November 12th game versus the Raiders at worst 4-4, the season in the back half really shapes up really well for them, right? They have games versus, I believe, the Houston Texans, the Atlanta Falcons. They play the Patriots again. Again, you have division foes. You never know how that's going to go. But like I was saying earlier, the Jets aren't scared of any of the division foes. They felt like they probably could have won all 6 of those games if they just had adequate quarterback play. So it's going to be a gauntlet to start because they have the Bills, the Cowboys, and the Chiefs, I think, right out the gate, right? So that's a gauntlet of a schedule. But if they can go 4-4 by the midway point, that November 12th game for the Raiders, it sets up really well for the Jets.
Yeah. Will has one more question, but as do I. You talk about having a competent quarterback back there. How good is Aaron Rodgers going to be? We look at his, for the most regular season passing yards, plus 2,000. And then his actual prop for regular season passing yards, just under 4,000, 3,975.5. And then his regular season touchdown passes, 27.5. That over juiced to minus 130. What do you think?
Yeah, I wouldn't sprinkle any money on the most passing yards in the league when you got Patrick Mahomes and Justin Herbert with Kellen Moore now. You know they're going to throw the ball down the field. But I like him to go over his passing yards, which is what you said, Mox, right under 3,000 yards.
Yeah.
I mean, this guy has done that 4 out of the last 5 years. And in a down year, he just went under that at nearly 3,700 yards last year. So I like him to go over that. And then that touchdown march, I believe it's at 27.5. I like him to go over that as well. Let's not forget, Will, you were talking about, you like a petty quarterback or anything petty, right? The last time he was pissed off, what did Aaron Rodgers do? He threw for 48 touchdowns. Yeah. That's what he did, right? So I liken him to do that this year as well. He's done it 2 out of the last 3 years and 10 out of the last 15, which is a crazy number if you think about it. 10 out of your last 15 years, you've thrown for over 27 touchdowns.
And two of those he was injured and didn't play the full season too.
Exactly. So I like him to do it this year. The rapport with Garrett Wilson seems like it's there. Again, bringing Allen Lazard over, who's going to be a big-time red zone threat. And then also two names you guys should probably look out for if you're doing fantasy. Tyler Conklin and Jeremy Rucker. I think both of these guys are going to be highly involved in the offense, but especially Tyler Conklin.
And we saw too, Rodgers has never been afraid to use a tight end in the red zone. And Conklin, underrated. I think a lot of people thought he might like you talk your fantasy with best ball and stuff. He might be sort of a breakout guy, like a later round, and then yada yada yada. Zach Wilson. Would you go over under? You mentioned Lazard, 600.5 receiving yards for Allen Lazard.
Yeah, so I'm going back and forth with this, Mox and Will, because if you just look at the history of Allen Lazard, last year he was quote unquote supposed to be the number 1 receiver in Green Bay, and his target share was crazy, right? I believe he had 100 targets, but only had 60 catches and went for I believe 780, right? But if you look at the history of him being a number 2 receiver, he hasn't gone over that 600 mark, right? So that number scares me. I'm going to go under just because when Aaron Rodgers has a true alpha male number 1, he's getting the target share. I mean, when Devontae Adams was with him, he was getting 140 targets a year, right? Yeah. So I could see Garrett Wilson getting that type of target share from Aaron Rodgers, which means that Allen Lazard won't be as targeted as much. So I'm going to go under, which I know Jet fans probably hate because they pay this dude, I think, $11 million a year. But I don't think that
was an entry. That's like when you give somebody money for like a chance to bid on Aaron Rodgers. Like we're gonna sign Allen Lazard.
It's a sweetener. We call those sweeteners.
That's right.
All right, we got to get out of here before Brinson and I get in trouble, but we're just having so much fun talking to you, Lige. Thank you so much to Lige Douzable. Stay tuned for more All 32 with daily drops in your podcast feed and on YouTube. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe here, and you can catch Lige on CBS Sports HQ all season long, talking ball. Thanks, Deuce.
Appreciate it, Deuce. Awesome stuff, man.
Of course.